Hi, this is Dr. Eric Fields, a specialist in compulsive gambling. If you're still thinking that your main goal is to make money from gambling, then you're going to want to pay attention to this video because I assure you, if you're a compulsive gambler, that is not your real goal. So let me go over some lessons that I have learned from working with compulsive gamblers for many, many years. So here's the first one. If you're a compulsive gambler, then by definition, you are in the red. And I'm talking about your lifetime gambling behavior, not what happened last night or last week or even last month, right? When you look at your gambling behavior across your entire lifetime, if you're compulsive about it and have a gambling addiction, you're going to be in the red. There's no way around it. And so, why would anybody keep doing the same behavior aimed at making money, right? If that's what you're saying, that I'm doing this because I want to make money and this is the way I think I can do it, you have many of you years and years and years of evidence to show you that you do not make money from this. Okay? And it's not that nobody can make money from this, but compulsive gamblers do not make money from this, right? So let's look at the two other comparison groups, the social gamblers. The social gamblers, by definition, are in the yellow. And the yellow doesn't mean that they're at zero or have broken even, but they're definitely floating around that, right? And this is relative to their income, of course, right? So that they're either plus or minus, but not by a lot, right? So their lifetime losses relative to their income, because that's important, are minimal, negligible, right? And likewise, if they're in the green a little bit, right, their winnings are minimal as well over the course of their lifetime. They might have had some big wins, but they've kind of been washed out by some losses. Then we have the rarer group, and that is our professional gamblers who are able to turn a profit from gambling. And they, by definition, are in the green, right? I like to use the traffic light metaphor. So I know technically we call it the black, but I never really understood why black is supposed to be good. It sounds kind of negative and bleak and dark, right? So let's go with the traffic light metaphor, the red, the yellow, and the green. By definition, they're going to be in the green. They have to be, or you can't call yourself a professional gambler, right? Okay. So your goal that you think you have is to make money. So which comparison group is more relevant to you? The social gamblers? No, because they're not really making any money from this. Or the professional gamblers who are making money from this. So that would be your comparison group. So let's stick with that as a comparison, right? I can tell you that professional gamblers, one of the biggest differences between them and you are they don't get emotionally involved with this. And so when they're losing, it's not affecting them the same way it affects you. It doesn't affect their ego the same way it affects you. Now, I'm not saying that, them getting some big wins and making some good money, especially on a certain week or day, doesn't stroke their ego, make them feel good, but it certainly doesn't bruise their ego the way it does you if they lose. So they're much more detached in terms of not taking it so personally. And they're definitely, as such, not so emotionally involved. They're really able to look at this objectively. Think of it like a financial analyst that's working with your money, right? So it's not their money, and so they can be very objective. And that's a lot of times why we hire financial analysts, right? One, because of course, they're supposed to be very competent and skilled at investing, right? But the second reason is because they're an objective person. And as human beings, right, we are emotional beings, right? Especially with matters that concern us. And that causes us to sometimes lose objectivity. It's the same reason why people go to therapy, right? Not just because we have this level of skill and competence and knowledge, that's a huge part, right? But the other part is that we can be objective and identify your blind spots better than you, right? So they have this objectivity, just like a financial analyst that you hire that's working with your money and investing your money. They're not going to be emotional about the investments, or they should be, right? They're going to be objective and a lot of times wiser and smarter about money moves than we will be. Okay? And professional gamblers, they have that capability. They have the capability to be more emotionally disconnected from the gambling and look at it very objectively. And therefore, they're able to stay in what we call wise mind. That part of our mind, the intelligent part, the rational part, right? The ones that make deliberate, the part of the mind that makes deliberate, thoughtful decisions, right? And compulsive gamblers will almost always slip into emotional mind at some point, right? Whether it be after the first bet or after the first hour or the next day or the next week, at some point, you're going to slip into emotional mind, which is irrational and is making emotionally based decisions, which is never good with financial matters, right? We don't want to make important financial decisions based off of our emotions. Now, that makes perfect sense to you, I'm sure. The part that I think you have to really wrap your head around is that you have great difficulty controlling yourself from slipping into emotional mind. That it's very difficult for you to not allow yourself to slip into emotional mind and therefore start making less rational decisions, impulsive decisions, um, and feeling based decisions, right? Like, you should never be saying this to yourself. I feel good about this bet. And compulsive gamblers say that kind of stuff all the time, right? Feelings should have nothing to do with the bet that you're making and especially the amount that you're placing on the bet, the wager, right? Um, so as soon as you start saying things like that, you know you're in an emotional mind. Or you start saying things that really kind of aggrandize you to this level that you're not at, right? You'll say things like, "Oh, I hit those first two bets. I knew this was going to be my night. I'm going to kill it tonight. I feel good. I feel lucky. I feel like I'm on. I feel like this is going to be a big one." Feel, right? So when you start thinking of yourself as being so skilled and good just because you got a few bets right, like that's a cognitive bias, right? You're falsely attributing a result that's really random based off of some kind of skill or competence that really has very little to do with it. So The professional gamblers, a lot of times you guys are comparing yourselves to them and you're like, you know, I do my research and I do my homework and I follow sports all the time. I know so much about sports, or I know so much about, the different teams and what have you. I follow all, the influencers that, are really good in terms of making sports predictions. I don't understand why I'm not making money from this or holding on to the money that I make from this. Why can't I do it? I'm doing the same thing that a professional gambler is doing. Well, because here's the biggest distinction in terms of the skill they have that you don't have. I'm I'm guessing that a lot of you are pretty good at doing your research. And like I've said before, a lot of you can, your odds at winning that first bet are pretty high a lot of the times, right? So that's not the issue. That's not the big difference. The skill that they have that you don't have is simply preventing themselves from slipping into emotional mind. That's the skill that you don't have. That's how they're able to disconnect, and that's how they're able to maintain objectivity. Okay? So here's another lesson related to this that I learned. Compulsive gamblers are impatient. Should you be impatient when you're making financial decisions? Matters that have to deal with money? Of course not. You know, if we were talking about finances in general and we weren't even talking about gambling, the things that I'm saying, you would be looking at me like, duh, of course not. Of course, we shouldn't be making emotionally based decisions with our retirement account, right? Of course, we should be impatient with making financial investment decisions or choosing different kinds of investment strategies. Of course, we shouldn't be impatient and impulsive, right? So this is what you really have to grasp here is that is the biggest difference. A lot of times you are right to think that your knowledge is just as good as many professional gamblers. Not for all of you. For all of you, it's not, right? But there are a lot of you that, from my experience, if you didn't have this issue of slipping into emotional mind, you would be a pretty decent professional gambler. You'd be in the green. So this is the biggest takeaway here, right? And think about this idea of being impatient and what's that all about. Of course, when we're emotional, we're acting in a hasty manner, right? And we're going to be more impatient, right? I mean, we do impulsive things when we're emotional, right? But there's another reason why you're impatient. And this really is going to further prove my point that you're really not doing this to make money, right? The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results, right? So you've been doing this for a while and still expecting to be in the green, but you haven't been, right? Well, here's another reason why. This is like a drug for you. Professional gamblers don't get the same kind of high you do. Notice how I didn't say they don't get any high because, of course, they get an ego boost if they win big, right? But it's not like you. For you, that high is everything. In fact, the anticipatory high for you can be even more significant. That is placing the bet and waiting with anticipation. Could I hit it? Right? You're already looking excited as I'm discussing this, I bet, right? You're already getting excited. They don't have that kind of anticipatory excitement like you do. Do they get a little excited? Of course, but not to the degree that you do. And this is a high for you. Okay? This is a high for you. And this high is why you're impatient and you don't just walk away when you're ahead. When you know that you should be walking away, or you should know that it's time to walk away. A professional gambler is patient. They're up a bunch of money and they're looking at the board and they don't like what they're seeing and they stop for the night. They say, that's it, I'm good. Or they start losing and they say, you know what, this isn't a good night. And I'm looking at the other spreads. I don't think I'm making this money back. I'm done. I'm good for now, right? So, do professional gamblers case from time to time? Yes. So do social gamblers, but not to the same degree you do, not to the point where they'll lose everything, right? They might case a couple bets and then they'll stop. They're able to stop. They're able to wait, right? It's that delay of gratification because it's not a drug for them. This is like a job for them. They're here to really try to make money. They're not here to get a high. You're here to get a high. If you also could manage to keep the money, that would be a great bonus, right? But that's not your real goal. And in fact, the two goals are incompatible. You can't make money and also have a goal of getting high. They are incompatible because to get the high, you have to do reckless, impulsive, emotionally based kinds of things, right? You can't get a high and make money at the same time, at least not consistently. Sometimes, some nights, the stars are aligned and you make an emotionally based or rational impulsive decision and you win big and you get the high and you make a lot of money. Sometimes. But you can't do it consistently. And so if you can't do it consistently, eventually what does that mean? You're going to lose your money. This is Dr. Fields. I hope you found this video helpful, and I will have more to say about this at another time. I wish you all the best success with trying to overcome this really serious addiction.